Kicking this list off, we have Frankenstein. Okay, not really the Dr. Frankenstein that we know and love, but the man who Mary Shelley based the novel off of, and around. Well, one of them at least. Mad scientists are still puzzled by the works of one Johann Conrad Dippel. Dippel was born at Castle Frankenstein in Germany, where he would attend university as a philosopher. He studied theology, philosophy, and alchemy at the University of Gießen, obtaining a master's degree in 1693. In the 1700s, he then turned to Hermetic studies and alchemy, and this is where it gets a little mad scientisty. There are claims that during his experiments at Castle Frankenstein, he practiced alchemy and anatomy at the same time, on both the living and the deceased. Yeah. Creepy. Dippel even said that the rumors were true that he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for secret knowledge. Yeah, that'll do it. He had a huge reputation surrounding dark sorcery, specifically for his work around the Philosopher's Stone and his claim to fame, the elixir of life. He performed experiments with cadavers and attempted to transfer the soul of one to another. Yeah, he was obsessed with this idea of soul transference with barely and freshly dead people. Common experiments among alchemists at the time though. One night apparently while he was working with nitroglycerin and the effect on magnetism and electricity apparently led to the destruction and a huge explosion at Castle Frankenstein. It was this night that he apparently was messing around with lightning and the answer to all his ailments came to him. Local mythology and lore recounts huge explosions and lightning emitted from the castle that night. I guess this was a pretty infamous night. It seems like it's right out of the book, no? Apparently this was the night he acquired the knowledge behind creating the elixir of life, his pride and joy. So what exactly happened that night at Castle Frankenstein? Huge lightning storm, or was this guy opening portals looking for souls? You tell me. Number 4, electro. Okay, they were definitely onto something back then. Lots of magnets and souls and electricity going on. It's 1803. Giovanni Aldini was an Italian physician and physicist born in Bologna, Italy. He, just like the other Dr. Frankenstein, liked to conduct high amounts of electricity through corpses to see what they could do. Yeah, sinister stuff. But science, you know? They like to do these crazy experiments and then write it down and stuff. Lab coats, you know. I have a weak stomach. I could never have sat through these experiments. Since electricity was relatively new at the time, all these zany ideas from these mad scientists multiplied the more playing around with it. Soon, it became otherworldly. The obsession around electricity, magnets, souls, other realms, they were hypothesizing leading to some pretty evil stuff. In 1803, the fresh body of a murderer was pulled down from the gallows of Newgate Prison in London and taken to the Royal College of Surgeons for experimenting. There, before an audience of doctors and physicists, Giovanni attempted to breach realms and return the corpse from beyond the grave. Ooh, okay. Homemade batteries and magnets was used, which made the deceased muscles contort aggressively, and apparently his eyes even opened, looking around the room. Giovanni then stuck the rod where the sun don't shine, then made the whole body start to move about as if it had come to life. For years, he was the leading scientist in electricity and its effect on the body. Apparently, some claim that Aldini would even experiment on himself, pushing the limits and dialing up the voltage. Dude, this guy's Electro from Spider-Man. In recognition of his merits, the Emperor of Austria made him a Knight of the Iron Crown and died not many years later. And although he was unsuccessful at bringing souls back from the dead using electricity, I'm sure this guy experienced more than he shared. I wonder who has his journal. Number 3. No, I'm Spartacus. Actually, much more evil than him. Heinrich Müller. Born in Munich, Germany, April 1900. After serving as a pilot in World War I, he joined the police in Munich, soon acquiring a reputation as a skilled investigator. As such, he would draw the attention of two nastier men, Heinrich H. and Reinhard H., leaders of the German SS army. Yeah, I don't even like saying their full names out loud. Just Google them up, you'll know. Müller entered the SS in 1934 and quickly rose through the ranks of the organization as a police official. In 1939, when the Gestapo police force and the other organizations joined the Reich, Müller was made head honcho. Yeah, basically this guy was like next in charge to you know who. He was a pretty scary and powerful guy. Müller was involved in a ton of criminal affairs. He helped plan the Polish attack, he signed the bullet order, he authorized the torture of officers who had conspired to kill other SS soldiers. People knew him and knew of him. He was, unfortunately, infamous and a huge deal. This is the weird part. When the Allies moved in and they arrested him, the man turned out to be another Müller. Okay. In fact, they couldn't find the Heinrich Müller, instead arresting many others of the same name. The head of the Gestapo wanted for crimes against humanity had vanished without even a trace. Gone. Even the CIA were like, okay, where the hell did this guy just go? He was just right here. He apparently vanished in the last days of the war. The Western Secret Services started many investigations over the years, but Müller and the vast majority of the Gestapo secret files were never found. In 2001, the CIA reopened its archives about the SS war criminal and revealed it still knew nothing new or conclusive about the SS Heinrich Müller, who had been in charge all those years ago. Where did this guy vanish to? I don't know. Number 2, us. Sure, I've had my fair share of sibling rivalry. One's better at this, one's better at that. But these siblings took it to a whole other realm. The Han twins, or as I like to call it, the story of good versus evil. A tale as old as time. Well, not that long ago, actually. During the 90s, this was a huge case plastered on every screen of the attempted murder of Sunny Han by her identical twin sister, Gina Han. Whoa. It's November 6, 1996 in California. It quickly became a jaw-dropping case in the media as the case touched on themes of broken families, sister rivalry, split personas, and of course, parallel universes. The sisters had always had disagreements, but apparently hatred became obsession. Throwing some hands here and there became stalking, and eventually jail time. The older they got, the more things escalated. Gina, after escaping prison, had drummed up the idea to hire 2 teenagers to kidnap her sister. Uh-oh. During the kidnapping, the plan, however, failed, and the 2 men were quickly taken into custody by police. Just before going to Sunny's apartment, they went to buy large garbage bags, duct tape, wine, gloves, Pine Sol cleaner, and magazines. Yeah. The police were notified and luckily reached them before Sunny's evil plan could commence. And it was a close one. They, including the evil sister, were locked and loaded. Literally. Scary. Yeah, as in she literally dodged a bullet on that one. This is like the Metal Mario version of yourself, isn't it? This is terrifying. Do you even think you could take an evil version of yourself? It's sad that it's family, you know? The jury reached their verdict as to each defendant on November 20th, 1997, and Han was convicted of all charges, which were 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of burglary, 2 counts of false imprisonment, and 1 count of possession of a weapon. So why did she hate her sister so much? How come she wanted to take over her life and just live one? This has evil parallel universe written all over it, dude. And number 1, the gods. Peru contains its fair share of ancient megalithic ruins. I'll do it again, sorry. Peru contains its fair share of ancient megalithic ruins. If you're not familiar with the construction and myths behind the Machu Picchu and the Nazca lines, then this next one may make you scratch your head. Some would say those are cute compared to this next rock? I don't know. The door in Hayumarca, some think it's a wall, but most believe it becomes a portal to the beyond. The story of the Gate of the Gods, also known as Door of Hayumarca, begins near the banks of the Titicaca over half a millennium ago. According to Incan legend, the universe began here, and according to researchers, the Incan Empire fell here, somewhere around 1592. Peruvians tell the tale of an Incan priest who barely escaped slaughter from the conquistador forces. His name was Aramu Muru, and he was a powerful high priest who served in the Temple of the Seven Rays. To escape his imminent death at the hands of the Spanish army, Muru fled to Hayumarca with the help of other priests, and using a golden disc key, Muru opened the small door in the face of the rock, apparently venturing into another realm. According to legend, the stone door transformed into a bright tunnel that was lit with an unearthly blue light. Aramu Muru passed through the barrier and entered the void, upon which the door then closed behind him. Spooky. Many people believe that he is now living in the land of the gods. Many still believe he is to return with the knowledge of the other side. I mean, if this guy just like platform 9 3/4'd himself through a perfectly sanded rock face, yeah, I'm gonna say it's ancient aliens. Right away, 100%. This site's also been said to be aligned by 5 other archaeological sites which together form an imaginary cross with straight lines crossing each other exactly at the point where this plateau and lake are located. That makes it even creepier.
Number 5 on this list is Pelagius. Pelagius lived around 390 AD, and although very little is known about his personal life, we do know that the church was really not happy with his theological teachings. The Catholic gentleman says, Pelagianism Arianism radically corrupted the church's teachings on grace, sin, and the fall. Its namesake, the British monk Pelagius, taught that the sin of Adam had no bearing on subsequent generations. Essentially, man was inherently good and unaffected by the fall. In practice, this meant that a man could come to God by his own free will with no grace needed. Many saints fought against this doctrine. Saint David of Wales stands out among them especially, but it was Saint Augustine of Hippo, arguably the greatest of the Latin doctors, and the church's mightiest champion against heresy, who rose to fight against this inherently venomous strand of thought. Against Pelagius, Saint Augustine upheld the truth that God's grace is entirely necessary for any movement of ours towards God to occur at all. As he himself puts it, we, for our part, assert that the human will is so divinely aided towards the doing of righteousness that, besides being created with the free choice of his will, and besides the teaching which instructs him how he ought to live, he receives also the Holy Spirit, through which there arises in his heart a delight in and love of that supreme and unchangeable good which is God. And this arises even now, while he still walks by faith and not by sight. Everything about Pelagius's teachings went against what the church wanted. They wanted and believed that people needed to be committed to God through them, but what this man was teaching was kind of going against that. This scared the church a lot because it was undermining their power to act as the medium for the average human being and God. Therefore, Pelagius had to be stopped. There's no record of him being executed, but we do know that at one point he had to flee Rome and go into hiding to continue his work. Number 4 on this list is Asmodeus. Asmodeus is actually a demon, and whether or not he is real can definitely be debated. But what can't be debated is how scared the church was of him. Grunge says the demon known as Asmodeus appears in the book of Tobit, a Judeo-Christian book of the Bible that's either religious canon or apocrypha depending on which branch of Christianity you subscribe to. Asmodeus is said to be the worst of the demons. He doesn't hesitate to kill, and he has what has to be the lamest, most specific Achilles heel in the history of monsters. In the book of Tobit, there's a young woman named Sarah who would very much like to be married. She becomes engaged, gets married, and then right before the sweet consummating, Asmodeus shows up and kills her husband. What might seem like a fluke quickly becomes a trend, as this happens to Sarah a total of 7 times. On lucky number 8, Sarah, who must have been an amazing conversationalist for this many guys to roll these dice, marries a guy named Tobias, who the Archangel Raphael gives the scoop on how to beat Asmodeus. The demon appears on the wedding night, and Tobias tosses a fish's heart and liver onto some coals, causing smoke that triggers Asmodeus's asthma or something like that. Asmodeus scampers off, and Raphael tracks him down, ties him up, and strangles him. So luckily for us, the text says that there's no more of Asmodeus, but that doesn't mean that his evil spirit doesn't still linger on. This is a demon that we're talking about here, and one of the worst ones ever at that. So I wouldn't be surprised if getting rid of this guy for good is a pretty hard thing to accomplish. Also, just a sidebar here, but poor Sarah, eh? This lady's just trying to get married and literally has to do it 8 separate times before one finally sticks. I think after marriage number 3, I'd personally just call it quits and get a puppy or something. Number 3 on this list is Beelzebub, another demon who is probably one of the most famous religious demons out there. Grunge says Beelzebub, a demon with roots in old Philistine religions. His name comes up in the Bible a few times in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, and he may be a stand-in for Satan, but another translation of Beelzebub is Lord of the Flies. John Milton's theory, described in Paradise Lost, is that he's a lieutenant of hell, second in power only to Satan, which is what folks in the industry refer to as Resume Gold. The starring role of Beelzebub's career is probably his part in the Salem witch trials, in which he was blamed for inhabiting the bodies of the accused. For anyone riding the fence on whether or not there was any real justice to be had there, it's worth looking at the writings of Cotton Mather, a Puritan minister in the area at the time. In his work of Beelzebub and his plot, Mather wrote that there is a devil in a thing doubted by none but such as are are under the influences of the devil. If Beelzebub was actually real, then he is responsible for the death of tons of people due to all of the witch stuff that went down. Not to mention just the trials, but what sort of stuff did he actually make these people do? It could be any number of things that we still don't even know about today. For obvious reasons, the church was not too fond of this demon. But it wasn't just the church. Your average everyday individual wasn't too fond of him at all either. Like, think about it. Back in the day, you would have to worry about having Beelzebub come and get you, and then you'd be put on the stake for being a witch if you did. Now, obviously, these witch trials were not done even remotely how they should have been, and it's unclear whether or not Beelzebub did or didn't play a role in them. But still, it doesn't change the fact that you would have been worried about him if you were alive back then. Number 2 on this list is Arianism. Arianism wasn't a person necessarily, but a full-on train of thought by many different people that the church was extremely scared of. The Catholic gentleman says, aside from the various Gnostic sects that plagued the early church, it is in Arianism that is arguably the most famous of all Christian heresies. It struck at the very root and core of Christian teaching that Jesus was God himself in the flesh and relegated the person of Jesus Christ to that of a mere created thing. It lives on today in varying forms, from well-known sects like the Jehovah's Witnesses all the way to the bizarre world of Apollo Quiloboy. Moreover, it still lurks within the sentences of some modern theologians who ambiguously state that Jesus is the Christ, but no more than an exalted man. Saint Athanasius of Alexandria was the walking cure for this heresy. Stubborn and unshakable, I think it not a stretch to say at times that this great man stood alone against wave after wave of Arian attacks on the truth of the Christian faith. By emphasizing and stubbornly holding to the truth of Christ as both God and man, St. Athanasius effectively ended the reign of the Arian heresy within the church. At the root, Arianism is basically the thinking that instead of being born, Jesus was created by God. This obviously goes against a lot of what the church teaches and believes in, and therefore they weren't too fond of this thinking or anyone who thought it. Pretty much anybody back in the day who did wholeheartedly believe this was condemned as being a heretic, and some bad things would be coming down the pipe if that was you. And finally, number 1 on this list is the devil. This one seems obvious, but just because it's obvious doesn't mean that we shouldn't include it on the list. The devil has always been the one to blame for any evil that is plaguing the earth. A great famine takes the lives of thousands of people. The devil did it. Someone loses their minds and kills a bunch of people. They must have been taken over by the devil. My coupon for 20% off on Hot Wings expired a week ago. Must have been the devil. Obviously, everyone was scared of the devil if he came for them. The church was scared of it, and the average person was scared of it. What is really interesting to me, though, is that the devil, even though he is horribly scary, is actually necessary to religion and the church. Without a devil, the only person to blame for anything bad happening would be God. The guy who's supposed to look out for us all the time would actually be the one doing all of the nasty things that happen to us, as well as all of the good things. Therefore, if we wish to believe that God is good and has our best intentions at heart, we sort of need to have a devil around to take the blame for all this stuff. It's just interesting to think that without the devil, one might be able to argue that we are the most scared of God. Not sure how I feel about that, but a cool thought experiment nonetheless. Number 5 on this list is Edward Edwards. Edward Edwards, for those who don't know, was an American serial killer who did most of his killing from 1977 to 1996. He has 5 confirmed kills to his name, however he's suspected of several additional murders that were never solved. Edward always had an affinity to crime. In 1955, he actually escaped from jail and went around America robbing gas stations and was at large for 7 years. He became so well known that he actually earned a spot on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list at the time. He also refused to disguise himself during these robberies because he claimed that he wanted to become famous. Eventually, in 1962, he was found and brought in. He was sent to jail, but didn't actually spend too long there considering what what he had already done. He was out on parole in 1967, which, as we'll later learn, was a horrible idea. The first known murders that Edward committed were in 1977 when he killed William Lavico and his girlfriend Judith Straub. They were both very young, and he took them out into the woods and shot them both with a shotgun. 3 years after this incident, he murdered 2 people again. This time, the victims were named Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, and instead of being shot, they were stabbed and strangled. Then in 1996 was his last confirmed murder, that of Danny Log Lochner. This was actually Edward's foster son, and he admitted to killing him for the life insurance policy of $250,000. In an interview, Edward very matter-of-factly owns up to killing Danny and shows zero remorse at all. He goes on to say that he was a schemer, and he'd always been a schemer and was looking for a way to earn a quick buck. He said that he had planned this thing for over a year and had been preparing everything for that long. In the interview, he very carefully lays out everything that happened and does it in a manner that it seems as if he's almost boasting about it. He even talks about how he took his head and threw it into a forest a year later after animals had bitten it off, and he doesn't even blink. Edward Edwards was an extremely sick and twisted man who clearly was not capable of feeling any normal and healthy human emotions. He died in prison back in 2011. Number 4 on this list is Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Sells is right up there as being one of the worst serial killers of all time. The acts that he committed were so gruesome and just plain evil that I can't even begin to understand the level of inhumanity that it would have taken to do it. He was only convicted for 1 murder, which he received the death penalty for, but authorities believe that he committed upwards of 22. Tommy Lynn Sells was known for murdering mothers and their... He didn't just stop with them though, also killing the fathers from time to time, but there was definitely a bit of a pattern involved with the mothers. In an interview that he had while he was still alive, he comes up with a sick and twisted reason as to why he did this.
I know what I went through as a child. The nightmares, the drama, the reality of who I was and what was done to me. I never wanted that to happen to another person.
Tommy Lynn Sells argues that he killed children to put them out of their misery.
I don't even know if there are adjectives in the English language to describe how messed up that is. Tommy Lynn Sells was eventually executed on April 3rd, 2014. Number 3 on this list is Bernard Giles. Bernard Giles is currently serving several life imprisonments for killing 5 between September and November of 1973. He was only 21 years old when he committed these crimes and had a wife and a child at the time. He would get in his vehicle and drive around on highways looking for young women who needed a lift. These hitchhikers would get into his car, and before they knew what was happening, Bernard would strike. In the clip that I'm about to show you, Bernard is far older. A lot of years have passed since he's been imprisoned, but here he tries to recount his first killings.
That day that you went out, when you did kill for the first time, was that a morning when you woke up and you were with your wife and daughter and something hit you and you went,
no.
Today may be the day?
Every day may be the day.
Every day?
Every day may be the day.
So there are multiple things about that clip which makes it one of the most chilling to me. I think what really gets me though is how he talks about every day being the possible day. Literally at any point, without warning, these serial killers could snap and then go on a rampage. And they don't even remember who it was that they killed. At least we know that Bernard Giles will be spending the rest of his existence locked behind bars. Number 2 on this list is Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was one of the most ruthless and prolific serial killers that we've ever known. He targeted young women in the 1970s and confessed to killing over 30 of them. How many women he actually killed is unknown, but the number is thought to be significantly higher than that. He engaged in all types of sick and sadistic stuff, things that I can't get too deep into on YouTube because they were just simply that bad. A member of his own defense team even came out and said Ted was the very definition of heartless evil. Whenever your defense team is coming out and saying that, you know that there's no redeeming you. Bundy died back in 1989 by means of state-sanctioned electrocution. Before he was executed though, Ted Bundy had one final interview. This interview took place in the evening of the day prior to him being executed. Watching this man who killed so many people and knowing that he's going to be executed the following day, there's just this cloud of darkness just that hangs over the whole interview. Ted Bundy described what it was like to kill someone by saying, "I want you to understand what happened. It was like coming out of some kind of horrible trance or dream. I can only liken it to being possessed by something so awful and alien, and then the next morning wake up from it, remember what happened, and realize that basically in the eyes of the law, and certainly in the eyes of God, you're responsible." Now everybody, he may sound almost remorseful in that little excerpt, but do not be fooled. This was a man who had intercourse with the dead bodies of the people he killed. There was truly not an ounce of good in this man at all. Number 1 on this list is Manuel Vela. The crimes committed by Manuel Vela actually happened not too long ago, which makes this whole story that much more scary. Manuel was a 28-year-old man who only a few years ago killed his girlfriend, who was 39 weeks pregnant with his child. Like guys, we are talking about just some of the most sick and twisted stuff ever. After he was finally apprehended, an interview took place. In that interview, he says that the only reason he was with his girlfriend all this time was to eventually kill her, and he had told her this time and time again.
Why did you stay with her?
Oh, to kill her.
So that was your only purpose this whole time?
Yes, kill her.
And you made it pretty clear to her that that was your whole purpose as well?
Yeah. Told everybody, hey, I'm gonna kill you, right? I'm telling him to kill her.
So apparently this guy had been telling her about this for years and was planning it this whole time. This is just some insane stuff that is honestly hard to break down. I have no idea how anyone could get to this place or what would cause something like this. Manuel Vela ended up taking his own life in January 2017.